Hey, what's up guys? So welcome to another episode of Get Better at Yu-Gi-Oh! And today we are going to be talking about briefly false committing to the field as well as playing greedy in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now playing greedy essentially relies on you making some awkward plays in order to benefit later on in the game. Usually it's seen in higher levels of play, whether it's something like League of Legends or StarCraft. People do a lot of weird things in the game to kind of out mind game your opponent because usually they would expect you to have a card at that time. You would activate it immediately to get rid of a card, or you would do something in a way where it would seem logical, but you're trying to do it in a way where your opponent does not expect it. So let's go ahead and jump into the examples because I got a bunch of examples to actually go through. So first off, playing greedy essentially will give you more cards. It'll essentially give you a card advantage on your opponent. Against certain decks, card advantage means nothing. An excellent example of this really quick would be something like Lightsworn. It doesn't matter how many cards you have against that deck is just going to completely just try to gain a huge advantage off of just one card. So card advantage against certain decks means nothing, just as a heads up. A deck like Six Samurais would be a terrible deck to top deck out of, but a deck like Lightsworn would be an excellent deck to top deck out of, late game. But you're going to be sacrificing potentially the game by usually using a card that you would normally want to use early on in the game in the circumstance that would seem normal, or you will actually be sacrificing life points. So that is the risk. It's kind of a risk/reward element of the game. An excellent example of a risk that has no risks but has huge rewards is a false commit. Let's go over a false commit really quick. So for example, let's say I go first. I open up with triple Reckless Greeds. I go ahead and set all three Reckless Greeds. Then my opponent realizes, okay, he's going to put a bunch of cards. I don't really have to worry about a Black Rose Dragon or a Heavy Storm because then, they would also lose all of the cards, so it wouldn't be a plus for them. But if these are all Reckless Greeds or Jar Greeds or Legacy Yatagaratsus, or even things like setting a bunch of things like Reinforcement of the Army, which I can then activate next turn and then go for a play like Black Rose Dragon or something like that. So keep in mind, you don't have to use Reckless Greeds. You can, false commit with other cards in the game. So instead of going, let's say you're playing Satellar Knights, you open up with multiple Reinforcement Armies, you already have Deneb, you already have Altair, you already have your setup ready to go, and sometimes not revealing what you're playing is kind of key, so maybe you don't have to actually summon Deneb, you already have multiple Altairs in your hand, so you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to make it so my opponent doesn't know what the heck I'm playing, I'm just going to go ahead and start setting Reinforcement Armies. Your opponent probably wouldn't expect that. Maybe that they're going to set everything that they have in their back row, and maybe, let's say you're playing in the OCG, Heavy Storm is legal, or Heavy Storm is always a card that comes back, or you're playing some deck that can again set back row that can just be activated where they're just cards that just search other cards. You can go ahead and make a Black Rose Dragon or something like that, or maybe you have a set Shaddoll Fusion, a set Upstart Goblin or something. You're basically false committing to the field, and then you're going to go off next turn and go, maybe you could play Mathematician into Felice. So you set your Upstart Goblins, you set Shaddoll Fusion, which can all then be activated next turn, and then your opponent, once they set everything that they have, you're going to go ahead and just blow out and simply win the game by that. So that's just one way of kind of false committing, but it's also kind of playing greedy in a way where you are basically, like I said, not playing in the sense where they would think logically you wouldn't be doing that. But let me go ahead and give you another example. Let's say that you're matched up and you're playing some type of Synchro deck or any XYZ heavy deck that has to use multiple cards to bring out one powerful card, and Thunder King Ryo is already face up on board, and you don't want to use two cards to get rid of Thunder King Ryo. So your thought process, let's say that you have like Mirror Force or Dark Hole. Let's say that you open up with Mirror Force or Dark Hole, and they happen to go first, they summon Thunder King. Now if your deck completely loses to Thunder King, which a lot of decks they can't really do much against Thunder King, some players immediately go for the Dark Hole play and then they try to go for their play. But you can actually play more greedy by, sacrificing some life points. Maybe the player playing Thunder King is also playing anti-meta. So let's say you Dark Hole, and let's say that you go for your play and it gets Warning, it gets Bottomless, Torrential, whatever. What if next turn they summon Banisher of the Radiance, which completely shuts down your deck as well? What you can think about doing instead is not to actually activate your Dark Hole or Mirror Force. Wait for your opponent to summon two cards or do more things in sacrificing your life points. You have a potential to get a +1, which would, or even plus harder, because maybe you have a torrential or something along the lines of that. So you're not activating your cards as soon as you can. You're kind of just saving them on the long run. And I know certain decks can benefit off of having life points because Soul Charge, very popular card right now in the TCG. Well, everyone plays Soul Charge, but that's just one little example. of that. Another excellent example, believe it or not, is MST. So many players will just activate MST on a card that they can't deal with. An excellent example would be something like Shadow or Lightning Imprisoning Mirror. So many decks right now, whether it's the Burning Abyss, the Shaddolls, or the Satellar Knights, these cards completely beat them. And sometimes players will go ahead and MST immediately, they'll get rid of that card, but then later on they will run into another problem where they have it. So let's say that you are playing Satellar Knights and there is a face-up Light Imprisoning Mirror, and you also have you have a Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. So let's say you're playing against Burning Abyss or Shaddolls, and you are playing Satellar Knights. So there is a face-up Light Imprisoning Mirror. A lot of players would think, okay, MST that, go for your play. But you can actually technically benefit in the long run. Perhaps this is all basically based off of just I would say not necessarily experience, but it's more so just on the whole side of playing greedy and getting extra advantage if you are at a disadvantage. Like I said, this can make you lose the game, but essentially I wanted to give you guys the concept of playing greedy, just so if you're in that scenario where you really need to get those extra cards, it can definitely help you out. So like I said, you're playing a Satellar Knights and your opponent has a face-up Lightning Imprisoning Mirror and you have a Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. So what if you instead of MSTing and going for your play, as long as you have the life points to take the damage, by the way. If you don't have the life points to take the damage and you have to make a play, then yeah, just go ahead and MST it. But let's say that you happen to have MST. What you would do is you would set MST instead, and maybe like I said, let's say for example that you're playing Satellar Knights and you have a Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. So you go ahead and you actually set MST and you set Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, and your opponent goes for you know, a MST next turn. They MST and they actually hit your MST, in which you can chain and get rid of the Light Imprisoning Mirror. Therefore your Shadow Imprisoning Mirror will not get MST'd. So it's essentially just a +1 in that aspect. Also, just setting MST in general can sometimes put the fear in your opponent, so you don't always have to activate it immediately. Sometimes they'll be like, well, what if that is torrential? I'm not going to go for my play, because even though they happen to have that Light Imprisoning Mirror, which is shutting you down, they're afraid of that one card, whether it maybe be a Vanity's Emptiness. They have no idea, so they might just play more conservative and they won't use their cards, which can actually give you a free advantage by simply letting you stall out the game, letting the game go longer on. Another example is, let's say you happen to open up with like a bad hand, but you have a Torrential Tribute. Sometimes certain decks rely on combo cards, or you just happen to have one of those brick hands, meaning that your hand is completely unplayable, just because let's say you happen to open up with like triple Shaddol Fusion, and you don't have like no monsters, you have like a MST and Torrential Tribute. So some players will go ahead and set Torrential Tribute just because like, well, it's the one card I can use, don't set anything else. Now, having 3 Shaddol Fusions is probably not necessary in your hand anyways, even though, you know, Compulse is still a thing, but, you know, you can only activate 1 Shaddol Fusion per turn anyway, so having 3 of these is not going to really benefit you at, you know, most circumstances in the game. And let's say that, for the example, we'll just take Madolches for an example, which is generally a deck that needs, like, 1 turn, and then it completely goes off really hard, and it can throw up an insane board. So, let's say that, like I said, you open up with a cloggy hand, you have triple Shaddol Fusion, you have Torrential, you have another card that's just, it's not a monster, it's not useful at all. So, instead of just going ahead and setting the Torrential Tribute and risking your opponent just going for that straight MST into make plays, you can set the Shaddol Fusions, or what you can do, just so your opponent wants to make plays, you can set 1 Shaddol Fusion, because usually what happens is, when there's too many back row, your opponent usually will not want to go for their most extensive play. They're not going to use their best card, they're not going to go all in. But if there's only 1 card, sometimes players like to play more aggressively, because they're like, well, it's only 1 back row, and if they have MST, they'll MST it, and then they'll try to go for a play. So let's say that you go ahead and you just set 1 Shaddol Fusion. Let's say that, for example, you decide to set 1 Shaddol Fusion. They go ahead, and if they have MST, they will more than likely try to MST it. They'll go for maybe like a Magdalene Search, or they'll float for it. They'll summon a card basically to try to float for another card with the Multitude Continuous card that lets you search other cards. So essentially what you would do would you would allow them to kind of set up their play, but then once they actually make their play, which would be, let's for example, let's take Magdalene would be the best example I can think of right now. So, like I said, you just set the 1 Shaddol Fusion. If they have MST in their hand, let's say they have no other monsters, they'll probably go ahead and MST to make sure that card goes through. So they're going to go ahead and summon Magdalene. They'll let that you will obviously let that go through, because, you know, you can't really stop anything. You just set a Shaddol Fusion. They go ahead and they get rid of your Shaddol Fusion. They go Magdalene, get out the Search, basically, Angelia or Hoot Cake, whatever they want to go for. And basically, next turn, they're going to go for their play. So at that point, they don't have the MST. So your Torrential Tribute will be much more effective, essentially, because you're letting your opponent go for the play to essentially set up for a later play, and you're going to go ahead and blow them out when they actually go for their play. So you're making it so they're just going to lose simply because they're just trying to get off their play. Like I said, this is all basically, I would say it's subjective in one sense, but it also has objective points to where I mentioned previously, especially with cards that you can false commit to the board, which are like cards that you can just activate immediately, whether they are the Heretic Seal of Convocation, Reinforcement of the Armies, the Smoke Signals for 6 Samurais, just any deck where you can actually, you know, blow up the board, whether it is with like Black Rose Dragon or if Heavy Storm comes back into the game, you can start setting your stuff. Reckless Greed is just hands down like just free advantage, but like I said, you can definitely use other cards that are searchers or something like that, or even stuff like Upstart Goblins. Let's say that you have the option to make Black Rose and you're playing like Shaddolls, like I mentioned earlier. You can go ahead and just set a bunch of cards that you can just activate the next turn and then go for your play and get a bunch of free advantage, and that's just essentially, in a sense, playing greedy in a way, and you're actually gaining a bunch of free potential advantage off of your opponent, thinking that, you know, they're like, why the heck would you do that when there's, you know, a Shadow Imprisonment? Why are you not MSTing immediately? Why are you setting this? You're taking that risk in order to get a free advantage later. But anyways, if you guys want to check out the previous series of how to get better at Yu-Gi-Oh, links down below in the description box. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you have any other topics, because I take my time when I make these series. I don't want to just make a series, well, just throw out a video for the series and have it be like mediocre. I really like thinking through this, and as well as talking to you guys about all these other theories. Well, most of these are things that I've been noticing and also have been heard about when I actually talk to players that have been topping YCSs and all that other good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Azneyes signing out.